Absolutely. And I mean, I remember clearly it was 2017. I was at a ULI conference in Los Angeles, and that was the first time I heard about co-living. And something clicked in me, and I just knew this is going to be the next direction I'm going in.
Hi and welcome to the newest episode of Urbcast. And today we will have the last episode of our collaboration together with Urban Land Institute Denmark. We created the series together some time ago to basically create synergies between our audiences, our organizations, and to inspire the members of ULI, the listeners of this podcast, and also to look at some of the industry trends. The trends within real estate and also urban development. So far, we've been discussing about the emerging trends in real estate in Europe, together with Lisette van Doorn, the CEO of ULI Europe, as well as Mette Soos Lassesen from Rumble and Samantha Deacon, also from Rumble, where we talked about the importance of measuring biodiversity. Then we had the episode together with Tom Faulkner from Heinz, where we discussed about the ingredients of successful projects, big urban development projects. And today we will summarize the series talking about the new co-living concepts. Why? Because co-living is emerging as this new form of communal housing, offering private rooms or studios within a larger unit or building, but along with shared spaces and services. It's gaining more traction across Europe, particularly in the UK, France, Netherlands, Germany, and Spain, but also in Denmark with projects like, for example, the Kaktus Towers. The rise of the co-living might be seen as an answer or a potential solution to housing affordability crisis. Let's be honest, we are facing a crisis, not an issue anymore, but also the pandemic of urban loneliness. And today I have a big pleasure to talk to Jack Renteria, who is an international leader in residential concept development, specializing in co-living and build-to-rent. He co-created the Kaktus Towers and its co-living concept, and led the delivery of Living By ALFA, overseeing regulatory development, construction, and operations. Jack is also the co-founder and co-chair of ULI Europe's Living Concepts Product Council and chair of ULI Denmark, where he connects investors, developers, and operators in innovative housing. What's interesting as well is that Jack was, for many years, partner responsible for business development at 3XN, the famous Danish architecture office. Let's dive into the co-living concepts and also the co-working concepts together with Jack in the last episode of our series together with the Urban Land Institute Denmark. I wanted to say first, thank you for having me.
Yeah, a pleasure. Absolutely.
And it's great that you are joining the show to summarize our series, as this is the concept that we created together once having a coffee, and we decided that it's actually going to be a very nice idea to collaborate and share some insights into the real estate development and also some of the trends. And that's how we created this ULI Denmark and an Urbcast series. And today we're going to talk about the living concepts, but also I would like to talk about the working concepts, because life and work, they are intertwined, obviously, but the world is changing. So let's discuss how it influences how we work, how we live, and how we enjoy the life. So welcome, and before we dive into the topic, maybe you could just shortly introduce yourself to the listeners and tell us a bit more about your professional development and career, because interestingly enough, you started here in Denmark working in architecture before you worked with real estate and living concepts. So that's an interesting journey.
Sure. Well, maybe it actually even, it's even quite relevant for the topic of today, because I moved here 16 years ago from Canada. And I'm really, I'm Canadian, but I'm also a Danish citizen. So I've got kind of, both sides to me. And, when I moved here, we were really just on the cusp of a lot of change. Copenhagen wasn't that super cool city that it is today. It was a city in transition. It was changing. It was putting in place all of these things that make it such a great city that it is today. And so when I moved here, I moved to work for a Danish architecture studio, 3XN, that was also on the verge of going international. And over the years, the office opened branches in Sydney, Australia, in London, in New York, in Stockholm.
Also thanks to you.
Well, I was part of the team. And I think this was what is really important. It was a team under Kim Herforth Nielsen that was really, really inspired and excited to go out in the world. And so we were all given a lot of freedom to explore and to see what could we do outside? How could we get to know other potential clients? And over the years, everything was at a level that was just extraordinary. We didn't do anything that was normal. Everything had to be cutting edge. Everything had to be at the limits of what we could possibly do. And that was a very exciting, couple of years to be working there, because we did incredible buildings that nobody really ever could imagine existing. That really kind of set in stone a little bit of like the way that I think about life and the way that I think about work, that there's always got to be a sense of excellence and extraordinariness about it.
How did it happen that you then started to be more interested into the living concepts and the real estate side? Because a couple of last years you've actually spent developing the living concept, but so to say on the other side of the fence.
Yes, well, this is where ULI comes in, because I quite early on learned about ULI, and to be honest, the business development directors of all of these major Danish architecture firms were friends. It was Kai-Uwe Bergman from Big that actually told me about ULI and suggested I go to one of their conferences in New York. And I remember being there and calling Kim, who was our founder at 3XN, and I said, we've got to join this organization. It's, real estate investors, it's developers, it's operators, it's municipal leaders. It's all the people that were kind of our clients, right? And on top of that, I was learning things from them. I was learning about like the future of workplace design. I was learning about what were the considerations they were making when they had to go to their investment committee. What was the role of the architect in the whole development process? And so whenever I'd go to a ULI meeting, I'd come back and hold a small workshop with our design teams. And we'd explore, pushing the boundaries of office, or we'd explore what are some of the trends that are happening that might result in different kinds of design. And so this is an example of like how ULI really helped us become better in a way.
I think it's the importance of like tapping into the real like market and real requirements and discussions, something that is hard to grasp only while sitting at your designer's desk.
Absolutely. And I remember clearly it was 2017. I was at a ULI conference in Los Angeles, and that was the first time I heard about co-living. And something clicked in me, and I just knew this is going to be the next direction I'm going in. It was a bit strange because, my role at 3XN was very much about like client relationships. It was about, our contracts. It was very, very much having to understand what our customers wanted. So I had to speak with a lot of our developer clients and understand how we could, provide a solution for them. That was not just a design, but also like, how do we make sure we get this, to the next level where you get the funding to build it? It made me start thinking, well, should I go then to the developer side? Is that the side that will allow me to start working within this new trend in living concepts, this thing called co-living? And in the end, I started to, make a move towards that. And, co-living resonated with me because when I moved to Denmark, I was 34 years old. I was what you could call a young professional. I was single. I was living alone in an apartment that was probably like 90 square meters. It was way too big for me. I mean, but that's what was available. And on top of that, to enter the rental market in Copenhagen, you had to pay 3 months deposit, 3 months prepaid rent, and then the current month. And I think it's a barrier to the rental market for all young professionals and expats that move to Denmark. I experienced it also with many of the young people that were moving to Denmark to work at 3XN and other architecture studios, because they just, they had to plop their whole life savings down to kind of get an apartment. And co-living offered this interesting alternative. It was a small unit, so, there were no dinner parties or anything like that in the unit. But instead, you had all this other space. And so the term came about. I can't remember where I heard it for the first time, but, you sleep in the room and you live in the building. And so I gradually started really paying attention to co-living. My model in London was the Collective, which was a brilliant concept, great concept, and really kind of looked at the business case for that and how it worked. And I became friends with a lot of the people that were very involved in getting the Collective off the ground. People like Adina David or Ashley Perry that have now gone on to create other concepts and working within other really exciting in this sector. And I really like that we kind of shared knowledge. I remember Ashley making introductions for me. Adina made introductions for me. I mean, we were all learning from each other. And I thought that was fantastic because it gave me the confidence to kind of create a prototype, so to speak. Like I kind of created one called Generation Global, which was then together with like a Norwegian developer geared towards young professionals. And then Corona hit. And that kind of sucked out.
The big interrupter.
Yeah, that interrupted a couple of things. But at the same time, it allowed me to get to know Catella, who was working on Kaktus Towers. And there, together with Cobblestone and together with Copenhagen Windows, we all co-created this fantastic concept for Kaktus Towers, this operational platform that really covered, the facility management, the building administration, the community management, the technology aspects. And that was exciting. That was super exciting.
That's a good segue, because I wanted to put one of examples from Copenhagen on the map of our discussion. And it inevitably has to be the Kaktus Towers that you've been working on. So please tell us what's inside of the building. What's the concept? What's the co-living concept? Something that is invisible to an eye of someone who is just walking around the building or just passing by and seeing the outer shell, which is still quite controversial. There are I would say there are some people that like the building, but there are also many people who don't like the building, like this physical look of the building. So I think that to understand this concept even better, tell us how it looked from the inside.
You raise an interesting question here when you say, what is something about that building that somebody walking around it wouldn't notice or know? And I will say that the thing that makes that building so special is its community. There is an extremely strong community that lives in that building, the 492 units there. They have 80 different groups on their app. And these could be groups for running, could be groups for going to the cinema together, eating groups, cooking groups, decorating groups. There are 80 of them. And this is what I noticed at the Collective when I did a site visit in London years and years ago. That I noticed that at 6:30 p.m., I could go down and there would be a group that would be going running. And I think it was November or December. It was not warm. And I thought, I'll do it. And I dressed in my running gear, went down. And there, as soon as I got into the lobby, was a girl named Claire that came over to me and said, "Hi, my name is Claire. Welcome to the running group." And we went running and came back. We changed and then went up to the restaurant for a happy hour. It was instant friends. And this is something that I think is so fundamental, whether it is a concept that is geared towards students, young professionals, expats, seniors, families, is this idea that you can live in a place that has a sense of community thought into it. Within the world of new living concepts, I mean, there's everything from the investment case and business case that has to work. There's all of the facility management, the operational real estate platform. There's a myriad of things that make them different from just traditional real estate. But the one thing that I think, the reason that I think it is so popular is because it fulfills a need. And that is a basic need of having some kind of social connection.
So this is the answer to the loneliness challenge.
Yes.
Or loneliness pandemic, actually.
When I lived here 16 years ago, or when I moved here 16 years ago, we didn't call it loneliness. I don't know what we called it, but I remember coming home to, my big apartment and had nothing really to do. And so I did a lot of walks, actually. That's how I got to know Copenhagen quite well. But we didn't call it loneliness back then, but it certainly existed. And now, where we, for good or bad, we have technology totally saturating our lives. I mean, that also is yet another reason that we tend to kind of lock ourselves away. And it makes it more difficult for, someone who's just without an established network of friends or family. It makes it more difficult for them to go out and meet other people. So if you can, from the convenience of your app, click on a button that says join, and it could be like going out for a movie night or going out, to kayak or swim, it makes it a lot easier.
How does it impact the affordability of such a house, of such a unit? Is it also affordable to everyone? Because I would assume that there are more than less people who like to be part of such a community. But I also assume that it can raise the value of the property itself because it is providing something else, something extra than a traditional way of living. So yeah, let's discuss this whole money side of those new living concepts.
You've raised two different things, and maybe we should address them separately. But the first thing is affordability, and the second thing is the valuation of the building. So let's go to affordability first, because we are going to have a high housing crisis very soon. I mean, we are already living in this. It's already extremely expensive for people to live in Copenhagen. There's a number of drivers for this, number of factors. One is that 44% of all households in Copenhagen are single-person households. Think of how much they need to pay in rent, or how much rent is for one person. It's pretty hard to handle that. The other thing is that I think it's 25% of Copenhageners are paying more than 40% of their income, of their disposable income on rent. That's very, very high. And this shows us we're having a problem, and we're having a problem not just in one segment of residential or not one kind of group or demographic. It's across all of them. So if we're thinking about students, young professionals, multifamily, or families, seniors, we don't have enough housing for any of those demographics. And the new municipal plan is actually trying, to see how we can increase that by 40,000 units over the next few years. We really need 60,000. So it's a challenge. Now, is co-living an affordable solution? Well, we need to look at co-living. And when I say co-living, I mean kind of like where you have groups of people living together. And that can be student, it can be built to rent, multifamily, where you're sharing amenities, space, where you have services, where you have activities. I regard all of that as co-living. There are also some specific co-living buildings, which are, Kaktus is an example of that. I think some of these concepts are solving one problem. And that is when you have, it's a mystery group of young professionals and expats that rent a room in an apartment. So they could be spending 8, 9, 10,000 per month for a small room in somebody else's apartment, where they have to make an agreement on when they can use the washroom, when they can use the kitchen, if they can have friends over. That's the group that is moving into Kaktus. That's the group that is moving into Noli, or into some of these other new concepts that are coming out. Noli is another really great, very interesting concept as well. NREP's concept that came from Finland. Super interesting. So we can definitely see that has been an underserved market. And it's not just, it isn't just something we're saying. It's something that when we were doing some research, we could see that groups like Copenhagen Capacity, that is responsible for attracting talent and retaining talent, would say that there wasn't enough places for them to live. Or companies like L'Oreal or Maersk, Novo, were all saying this as well, that, their employees couldn't find any place to live in. We are providing a better product for them, those that were basically couch surfing before, right?
That's a terrible situation. And it's not only in Copenhagen, although Copenhagen in this particular example, that, as you said, like when you came here like 16, 15 years ago, it wasn't as hyped, it wasn't as well developed, it wasn't as attractive. But obviously there were more and more people coming here, myself included, to Copenhagen, which was already very cool. But obviously, like the housing market can't follow the pace of the new people coming. But maybe one more aspect about that. So basically, like co-living means some sort of a compromise, because you would own or you would live on less square meters, because some of it would be shared. So for example, instead having a working room, you would have co-working place somewhere. Is there like a co-working place in Kaktus?
Yes. Yeah, several.
Do you think that this notion of being able to resign from some amount of square meters, but instead sharing some of the facilities, is that something that more and more people will be willing to do? Or are we still talking only about a certain group of people?
I think it's also a certain group of people. I mean, we did quite a bit of research, and I remember being rather surprised at this group. Now, the average age at Kaktus is 30.5. They're really this group that is in transition in a way, like they are this group that is finished with school, in their first, second job. Actually, they could also be in their first, second city. Maybe they moved from Singapore or London. So this isn't going to be where they're going to live for 10 years and start a family. But this is a place where they're going to live while they adjust to Copenhagen, while they move here. And that can be, 2 years. And, for them, experiences are more important. They're quite satisfied living in a small space with their own washroom and with their own mini kitchen, if they've got many other spaces that they can enjoy. I was really surprised to see on Instagram, there's a guy that held this amazing white party in Kaktus. I couldn't believe, the party looks like it's straight out of Ibiza or out of like something, Mykonos or something. It was so amazing. And Kaktus was the perfect frame for that, because it just symbolized that kind of youth, that, excitement of life. I think he works for Novo Nordisk. So it's just that time in your life where you can throw a party like this and just be so excited. So his home, he doesn't think of it as a tiny place. He thinks of it as a place where anything can happen.
And that is very appealing to a certain group of people. And how does it influence the valuation? Because that's the second element that I was wondering. Because, what's the money role, and how can such a project, how such a co-living concept in Kaktus example or in other examples, how can it be developed? Is that the developer themselves who initiate such a process, or rather they would need some external encouragement to invest into co-living concepts?
So this is an interesting question, and I think we need to speak a little bit more broadly here, because now what we're talking about is a general move towards operational real estate. Now, operational real estate is like the basis for new living concepts, new office concepts, actually like can also be extended to retail. My friend Thulandergruppen, Carl-Johan Collette, he is the new chair of the Operational Real Estate Product Council with ULI Europe. He said something that I'm going to, re-quote here, because I thought it was a brilliant way of describing it, that a building now has two lives. You basically have the building, the asset, what it is as a piece of real estate, and then you also have the daily life within. What happens throughout the day in that building, which gives value to the asset. Now, if that life during the day is exciting, is compelling, attracts other people, generates a waiting list, offers services that are chargeable, offers activities that are chargeable, what you've got is like additional revenue streams. You've got a stable rent, or a rent that continues to increase after, as people move out. You've got a very, very good investment case. And that impacts, of course, the valuation. The latest ULI Emerging Trends in Real Estate report actually has a section on operational real estate, where they're quoting several heads of investment funds that are saying, yes, we can see it. One guy actually says all real estate is becoming operational. I would say not all at once, but it is happening. People are starting to realize this. And we can even notice it amongst institutional investors. You could even say some of the most conservative ones would be pension funds, for instance, that are now looking at their portfolios and saying, yeah, maybe we need to start looking at how we bring in operational elements to this. Maybe not as intensively as, say, a Kaktus or a build-to-rent product from NREP like Umius or Plushusene. They are starting that as well because the customer is asking for it.
Does it mean that then a developer is also some sort of a curator at the same time? Is that a comparison that we can draw, that in the traditional sense, there would be a developer who would invest in an asset, and then they would lease it to either residents or to companies, and then just have some profits. Whereas now it would be the developer who is actually very involved through the whole process, for the whole time, and is actually thinking and conceptualizing, okay, who would be the great fit in terms of companies, who would be the great fit in terms of customers, and so on.
You're asking the $100 million question. I mean, it's really kind of fascinating because there is an incredible report that has been done on operational real estate by McFarlane's. It's called the McFarlane's report, and it kind of says there is no manual out there on how to build an operational platform. And these operational platforms are this kind of system of providing, facility management, building administration, community management, technology in a functioning way to maximize the value of a building. They're different. They're different for each building. They're different for each portfolio, for the different demographics of people that are living in them. and they need to be tailored and curated. It was a good word you used there earlier, curated. Developers haven't typically been working with this. So, and neither have real estate investors. So, I mean, therein lies the hesitancy for many in moving towards operational real estate. And so some of them have looked at, okay, do we do this all in-house, which would be what we call a vertically integrated approach? Or do we outsource and get an operator? Do we get somebody else to come in and run it for us? Almost like how you could do with a hotel, for instance. You know, you have a hotel operator, somebody that owns the building, that is the owner, and then they bring in a hotel operator. The only thing is that there aren't a lot of residential operators yet. They're coming.
They might come. I mean, some of them, maybe we just inspire them. Maybe someone is listening to it, and that's also the idea for the podcast, to inspire people.
And, you know, like the one thing that I have really seen over and over again, especially through, you know, being past chair of ULI Living Concepts Product Council, you have to get that model right. I mean, there isn't a lot of extra, you know, fat around to be able to, you know, overstaff or spend too much money on the CapEx, or, you know, you really have to think through very, very carefully how your operational platform is going to work, because there is a great potential to see increased returns, to maximize the value of your portfolio. But there's also a great potential of spending way too much money and not running it as efficiently as it could be. We have many examples of that in the UK. I would say that the UK has been very much a front runner for some of these new concepts. So you've seen some fantastic examples there, but you've also seen some that unfortunately didn't do so well. And we've got to look at these. As we start learning how we can do the best with our portfolios or with our buildings, we've really got to look around and see some examples and read some case studies and figure out, well, how am I going to make it work for mine? And both work. Getting an operator can be perfect. Or, you know, having it vertically integrated, having the people and the know-how within an organization works too. I have my preferred approach, but you know, you can't always have what you want, right?
Let's discuss about one more crucial thing, which is the kind of whole sustainability aspect to it. So one can say that by the fact that you share, that you live together, you already live in a more sustainable way than living only on, as you did, on 90 square meters alone. Because instead, some of the square meters can be used for shared facilities and, for example, shared laundry room, which is something that I just realized that it was, I think now it's the first or the second year in my 8 or 9 years of living in Scandinavia that I have a washing machine in my own flat, because before it was shared, and that was something very normal. But in that way also you can save energy, you can save the cost, because you don't need 30 or 50 washing machines in the residential block, but instead you have just 5 in the basement. But this is one way of looking at it through the sustainability aspect. And if we talk more about in the new living concept, so for example, we could mention Kaktus as well. What are some of the sustainability measures that could be used and could go hand in hand with the new living concepts solutions?
Well, you've mentioned already like how it is more efficient when you have shared amenity spaces. You know, I was just visiting one concept called Milo not long ago in Sydhavn. They have this fantastic cupboard, or big. It's not just a cupboard. It looks really cool, and it's got ironing boards. It's got drills. It's got all sorts of things in it that you wouldn't necessarily want to buy, you know, and have it in your unit, but you can rent them, and it doesn't cost much. But you know, I could see myself renting the ironing board and the iron Sunday evening, doing all my shirts and bringing it back, and that's great. Then I don't have to buy it. So you've got these efficiencies that can come in, and I think that's actually quite nice, quite sustainable. People live in a smaller space. They share other spaces. All of this, is, I think, it makes sense. But I would say that maybe even more important, because quite often we talk about ESG, right? More important is the S, which is the social impact of these places. And that is something that is sometimes hard to quantify, but you can certainly feel it and see it. And it doesn't matter at which age group it is. I see that I've seen in one senior building that I had been working on, there was a lady that was in her 80s who just really, really looked ill when she was moving in. She had to be carried by her 2 kids as she moved in. And she met her neighbor and they started going for walks. And I'm not going to claim any kind of miracle cures from build-to-rent communities, but I will say, it makes a huge difference if you just make one friend. And she was wearing her backpack, going on walks every day. And that, I think, is incredible that it happens. It is something that we can see. Especially as seniors start moving into these communities, they have a bit more space. They're downsizing from their houses. Their kids have moved out. But it's very scary for them to give up the home that their kids have lived in. Maybe that one of their spouses has passed away. So, we've been talking about the loneliness that a young professional feels, but, the loneliness that a senior can feel is pretty powerful. And for them to come into a community, it's very beautiful to see as they start making new friends and creating a new chapter of their lives.
So we should talk beyond sustainability in this kind of overall sense. Perfect. We've discussed the co-living trends. We discussed the affordability, different actors, also some of the ideas on how to arrange the space, how to use co-living, and also battling the loneliness. And now let's come back a bit to the young professionals, and not only professionals. So just let's very briefly, because the main focus is on co-living, but I really wanted to also discuss briefly the co-working trends. Since the pandemic, which also influenced your work personally as well as many other people, what's the outlook as of now? So since more people work from home, do we even need offices in 2025? So do you think that the companies still should try their best to attract people, or there was some sort of a shift that offices will not be very needed?
That depends on which market, because what we can see here in Denmark is that the office sector has really held its ground compared to other European cities. In London, not everybody went back to the office yet. Many people have just kind of evolved into a week where they work 3 days from home and 2 days from the office. So this is a sector that is under quite a tremendous amount of change. And we see new opportunities for workspaces that can recognize this change. So now you've got workspaces for people who are working from home, but that don't want to go into the office. So in fact, and you find them in many different configurations. I could mention 3 actually. So take a place like Blocks Up. That's a brilliant example of operational real estate, operational office, which offers many different kinds of office product, from a personal membership to a corporate membership and everything in between. That is as flexible as offering space for a young startup company to, even Novo Nordisk has space in there. I love that concept. And it's especially strong because it has a common or red thread that runs through it. And that is the fact that it's sustainable urban development focused. Then you've got places like Woods, for instance, in a way open to everybody, offering also a broad selection of different kinds of product. You can go and sit in the cafe there and work if you want. Or, you can take a floor, or you can take a block of offices. And then you've got places like Zoku even, Zoku offers this day package where you can work from their space, really, really nice space. You get lunch included, coffee included, and can spend the day there. Go around and use different kinds of parts of their kind of lobby living room space. The office product is changing, and it's becoming more flexible, and we're seeing more products within it. The traditional office now has to take these spaces into account. And I would say they're becoming much more flexible too, because I was quite often working within the future of work spaces, even when I was at 3XN. There was an amazing couple of buildings we did. I remember Swedbank was one of them, the headquarters for Swedbank in Stockholm. They had over 30 different work space possibilities in that office. They also had 5 different generations of employee working there. Each of them had a specialization. Each of them had knowledge they did not want to lose as an organization. So they had the guys that had been working there for 30 years that knew everything about Swedbank. And they had these young traders that were just coming in that were whizzes at what they were doing. And I loved walking into that building because you saw people in the cafe with their headphones on working on their laptops. You saw there were special kinds of chairs and for these guys that were used to having their own private offices. You had silent zones. You had just so many different kinds of areas to work in. I mean, that I think was a company that really took things seriously.
I think there was this overall rise of sharing co-working spaces where instead of having one office for yourself as a company, you would go to, for example, the co-work, or I used to work in WeWork in center of Warsaw myself, and I really, really enjoyed it. Although after a couple of hours of working on this common shared space, it was getting very tiring because there were like a lot of people chatting. There was a lot of coffee machine noise and buzz. There was also music that was, just some tunes, like launch tunes vibes. And I realized that actually it's not working for me to work there for the full time. It would be just maybe a couple of hours here and there. So do you think that, is it only me, or do you think that the people are actually not made for such a broad co-sharing model? Because we are discussing a lot of like co-sharing in living. Now we are also talking the co-sharing in working. So in a way, it's about people becoming more and more together. But don't we actually need some, own time? So don't you think that some of those changes will be quite difficult to implement?
First of all, I don't think anybody is really made to work 8 or 9 hours in a row just by themselves on something. Some of these workspaces that are evolving and changing and are being designed in different ways, they are reflecting that. People will want to work in groups. Then they will maybe want a little bit of time on their own to work, more focused and concentrated. Then they might be taking a Teams call or, having a call with somebody via their computer or phone. They need different spaces in which they can do that. So what you've just described is the fact that at WeWork, in that location, there wasn't any place for you to be able to focus and concentrate because they had music playing and there were too many people around wanting to talk and distract. And so that's a very real problem. But I think some of these new offices, like the Swedbank that I described, or Blocks Hub, what they do is they provide these different spaces. So in the course of a day, you can be in 3 or 4 different spaces and get the work you need done. There are a lot of products out there that are not that great too. I mean, I went to one just around the corner from me, which is trying to be co-working. And I think it's kind of a cute thing that they're saying this, but I mean, I looked at it and I thought nobody will want to work here all day, 5 days a week. I mean, you need to have some variation. Do you have services? Do you have activities? Is there something you can offer your customer that makes it interesting?
Coming to the end towards the roundup of this discussion, I would like to ask you for a short reflection about this whole series that we had through your own lens, because we talked about the emerging trends in the European market. We've been talking about the importance of biodiversity and measuring the biodiversity. We've been having also a great conversation with Tom Faulkner from Heinz about those different approaches to projects and how the Danish market has some of the challenges that can be overcome through this global lens, and also how to make a successful project. Now we discussed the co-living. So what is your feeling for this year? What are some of the topics that we should be watching if it comes to real estate and development, urban development?
Well, Martin, first of all, I think this was a really nice collaboration. It was a way that your listeners could get to know some of the ULI Denmark members. They could get to know our ULI Europe CEO, who was the first speaker in the series. ULI Denmark is over 80 members that come from many different disciplines and backgrounds. We've got investors, developers, we've got engineers, we've got academics, young people. We've got quite a variety of people, not to mention, of course, architects and urban planners. And I think it's super interesting that this, it's a nice short series that we did, but it gave a spotlight on some of the different backgrounds we have in ULI in Denmark. I think as we go forward, I would invite you to follow what the activities of ULI Denmark are. In May, we will be hosting our first national conference. And the theme of that conference is going to be more relevant than ever before: geopolitics and capital markets. We will have a speaker, Manuel Muniz, who will be here. He has just moderated 5 sessions at the Munich Security Conference. He's one of the world's leading geopolitical experts. And he's agreed to come to Copenhagen on May 12th and talk to us about, our position in the Nordics, our position in Europe, our position globally. So we are now going to have to start looking at how all of the geopolitics issues also impact capital flows and real estate.
There is a lot of things happening if it comes to that. So now, save the date. Now it's the 12th of May. So this is to our listeners that are based in Denmark, but maybe some of you are willing to travel and join.
Would love that. Yes, very welcome.
On the 12th of May. We'll add the link to ULI Denmark activities in the description of this episode. But now let's round up with a book. And that's my standard question. And I really love my guest recommending the books. The last one actually from the series recommended by Tom Faulkner was about the Utopia for Realists, which I just finished yesterday, and that's such an amazing one. So the bar is high, but hopefully you have a good recommendation as well.
Yes, I mean, it's been all interesting books that people have been recommending. I didn't know if I should do it from a professional side or a personal side, but, the book that is next to my bed that I'm reading is called The Future of Geography. And it's how power and politics in space will change our world. And I think that this is super interesting, especially because of, who the US president has surrounded himself with and the ambitions that go beyond just our own planet. So that's the book I'm reading at night. But one of the books that is more relevant, and I would really, really recommend it to anybody that is working within new living concepts or looking at bringing operational aspects to their portfolio, is The Art of Co-Living by Guy Perdrix. This book has been such a huge inspiration. It's really a guide to understanding the co-living industry, and then how to build in like some of these co-living spaces into your buildings. And it gives you so many different things to consider. Guy is one of the world's experts on this. I mean, he's someone that I really have learned a lot from. On every project I've ever worked on, this book has been on my desk. Mm-hmm. So I would certainly say that if you have the chance to pick it up, you won't regret having that book on your desk as you go through some changes in your portfolio.
Perfect. So we have Guy, and we have also Tim Marshall, and he actually created a couple of the books about geography. I've read one about, I think it was his first, about basically like geography and how it influences our world and how some of the processes will continue forever because of geography. But thanks so much for both of the recommendations. I will also share them with the listeners in the summary. And for now, I just wanted to say, Jack, thank you so much for closing up the series together with me. It's been a great pleasure to run the series and to have you as a guest.
Oh, thank you, Marcin. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to our conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it. To me, the co-living concept, together with the co-working concept, is truly fascinating. And I think that recent years, things like pandemic as well, influenced the way we live and changed the way we live, obviously. But the rising housing crisis and the rising loneliness crisis, they were there for some years now, also before the pandemic. And I think that we need to rethink the ways how we live. And perhaps co-living might be the answer to some of those challenges. You will find more information about the topic, about Jack, about the series in the episode's description. And I wanted to say thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you soon.